Scott Huntermark recently finished his first 100-miler at the Mines of Spain, but the training plan was a nightmare, to be very honest. This is a very raw conversation, and I really appreciate Scott being so open and sharing his story. Ultra running it's not always pretty, and sometimes the ugliness isn't the, like David Goggins style, broke his feet and taped them together and got rhabdo but still finished kind. Sometimes it's just like night sucks and your headlamp breaks and your training falls apart because you got sick and then you got sick again and then you got sick again, but you still finished it anyway, kind. And that's when toughness really comes into play. Most of us can overcome one really hard thing or like a difficult spot or something really brutal. But the death of 1,000 cuts is truly miserable. It can break down even the strongest among us. This is why Scott is truly one of the toughest athletes I've ever met. We can all learn a lot from him, and he's just a great guy. I think you're going to get a lot out of this interview. I hope you enjoy listening to it as much as I enjoyed recording it. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Eat Well, Sleep Great, Run Far podcast. My name is Will Frantz, and I'm here to help you go farther, faster, and longer without injuries, gut problems, or giving up your favorite foods. All right, this week on the podcast, we have Scott Huntermark. He is an athlete who just finished the 100-miler for the Mines of Spain, and I think it was his first 100-miler, and we're going to get into all that stuff as we go. But first, Scott, I'd love to know how you ended up actually doing your current job, because I don't know how that happened. And I think it kind of becomes relevant to training for your hours of sleep. So how do you end up doing what you do?
Oh man, I landed on my current job kind of out of a fluke. My previous role with another company was eliminated. So I was looking for something relatively soon, but I wanted to get in a totally different industry. I was in the cellular industry for over 20 years, and sales is peak hours as far as what I do on my route.
So you broke up for a while there. Basically going to have you for free reset. I lost you at sales and your old job, it got eliminated. You were in sales for cellular. And then what do you do now and how'd you end up there?
So now I'm a route salesman for Frito-Lay.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think the reason I'm asking is because that has you up at 2 a.m. every day?
Yes. My alarm's set bright and early at between 2 to 2:30 a.m. every day. So it's fun time.
Super fun. Where does that how does that affect your general sleep? And how long have you been doing that?
I've been doing that now for 4 years. Generally affecting my sleep. It's been a big deal. It's a big deal. I've got 2 teenage girls at home. My wife works a 8 to 5 type job. So, you want to stay up, you want to hang out, be part of the family. Everybody has activities going on. My girls are in sports. My wife has activities that she's involved with. So, going to bed at 6:30, 7 o'clock really doesn't work out on a regular basis.
Yeah, man. I feel that.
To say the least.
Yeah. So, I remember the adjusted schedule when I worked night shift, and it really puts a damper on your social life, to say the least.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. But at least I get done early so I can, take a nap. I can do my workout, do whatever. And then, be ready to engage with the family later.
So if we're looking at fitting running into a schedule like that, do you tend to do it after work then, kind of early afternoon?
Absolutely. So when I'm done with work, usually I'll hit a lull where my energy level is pretty low, and I'll get home and I'll just kick it back into high gear, get my run done, get my workout done. Usually it's sunny and nice out yet, especially during the winter hours when it's getting dark earlier. I can still enjoy some sunshine. So I appreciate that.
That's actually pretty nice, man. So it's like I'm looking at running through a bunch of darkness here soon. So I feel you. How did you get started with running? Was this the thing you did in high school, or how long have you been doing this?
No, definitely not in high school. Oh my gosh. I remember in high school trying, my brother ran cross country, and I remember trying to run from where my folks live to where my grandparents live, which is only a mile down the road. And I'm like, oh, I can totally do this. And it's like, a gradual downhill and run back 2 miles. Easy, right? I mean, it shouldn't be that bad. I mean, people in cross country are doing like, double digit miles.
Sure.
That did not work out very well. So needless to say, I played football in junior high, and
Cool.
I had some water underneath my knees, and I had a drop. Though I love playing football, if I got knocked down to my knees, it was not pretty. I mean, it hurt. And of course, the doctors are like, well, we can drain that fluid, but it's probably going to come back. So what's the point of that? And the running thing really didn't work out. So I ended up not doing any sports during high school, but I always had this little fire in me about running. And when I was like 18, 19, I would go out and, I would go for a mile run, what have you, what I could, half mile. It always, seemed to fill my bucket in that little way, that I could accomplish doing something that's hard. And it kind of kept me in shape a little bit too.
Sure.
At the same time, I was a smoker, and I smoked for like 15 years, right? So I'm sure that did not help the equation, but somehow it helped balance in my head, like the smoking, if I can run some, the effects won't be as bad.
I mean, you're probably not technically wrong, but yeah, it doesn't completely cancel it out, but it at least does something, right? Like it's better than both being sedentary and smoking. So yeah, I feel you. For sure, dude. Yeah. So if that's kind of how you were like, at least got the bug in there, how did you end up running ultras then? Because there's a big jump from that like mile to half mile struggle at 18 to running 100 miles, right?
Yeah, totally. So fast forward, I always, ran periodically, and maybe that's once a month or what have you, but I always got that runner's high when I did. And I just, and I love to do it, though I wasn't good at it. And, there's nowhere, 2 miles is like a lot at that time. But, fast forward, 15 years, I gained a bunch of weight. I was like 240 pounds, 2 kids later, and awesome kids and awesome family, awesome wife. And, here I was like, I blew up like a balloon, and no matter what I would do, I couldn't seem to really lose any weight.
I get that. Yeah.
So I started running, and I kept pushing myself to go a little bit more and a little bit more. And especially, we talked about my current job, and especially with this current job, I mean, I remember starting, and, I was over 240 pounds, and we have to stock some bottom shelves. And I remember sitting Indian style on the floor because that's all I could do. Right. And I would get home at night from my job, and I'd throw ice packs up and down my legs on both sides. No joke. For like the first 2 months. I mean, I was a unit. This is way more physical activity than than I'm used to doing. And I grew up as a farm kid. Right. So we did a lot of physical activity, but this was to a whole new level. at the current moment in my life.
I feel that.
So yeah, it wasn't really till I started that job, and I'm like, you know what, I really need to do some changes. I was on high blood pressure medication. I was like, pre-diabetic, and I know there's a lot of people that have similar stories. And running just became my thing. And I'd keep pushing myself after work. My wife got me my first Fitbit so I could track my steps, and made some really good social media friends, if you want to call them.
Absolutely.
On there. And I still to this day do Fitbit challenges every single week. And
that's awesome, dude. I didn't know that. That's cool.
And slowly, there was a bunch of us that migrated over, and we're on Strava now together, and what have you.
Yeah.
And some haven't, but it's still fun keeping that connection. And that was back in 2017. So a lot of these people, I've known on social media for years now, which
that's
is
awesome, dude.
really cool.
That's really cool. Yeah, like I love all of that. Love the turnaround, love the change. Like I've made a couple of that in my life. And I want to like point out that this is where social media can actually be helpful, right? Like I historically am not the biggest fan, but I've become a bit of a convert, especially because coming in here, because like if you use it appropriately, then you can be motivated and like create these groups of people across the entire country, and drive each other to achieve huge heights. I think it's cool, man. It's really cool. So that's great.
It's fun. And to be on that journey with other people who are runners too, that back when I would do a mile or two and we'd be cheering each other on.
Yeah, dude.
And I've got one buddy on there, Andrew, who's out in the Carolinas. He is just incredible. He's doing ultras now too, and we still chat, and he's put a bug in me to get out there come next May for a little ultra race out there.
You should do that. Yeah,
steep elevation, so we'll see what happens.
You should go do that. I think it'd be great. Cool. Well, I love that just kind of built from a big change in life, deciding to get in a little bit of better shape and moving through it. And I will say one question I have kind of going back through that is, if you had water under your knees in high school, did that go away? Like, I know you and I have discussed some things with knee pain. Is that still there? Is this a thing that you kind of battle with to this day? All that.
It did go away.
Cool.
And it never really hurt like post high school when I lived in town and I'd be running on sidewalks and what have you. It never bothered me running. However, anytime that I would kneel, it did. So it took quite a while, and I still have these big like bumps underneath my kneecaps, and it's one of, they're still there. They don't hurt, but yeah, it's definitely something that I didn't know how long I'd have issues for.
I feel that. I mean, as someone with bursitis in my right knee that is like never going to go away, it's kind of a weird thing and it's different. Mine's not painful unless I hit it in the right spot, but it's just kind of weird when you have something going on that's kind of, I don't know, not normal, for lack of a better term. You never quite know what you're going to get. Yeah,
exactly.
So you recently finished Mines of Spain, and congrats. I know you and I've talked twice then, but it's huge.
Thank you.
That was your first 100-miler, right?
That was my first completed 100-miler.
Okay.
I mean, I attempted one with another buddy of mine at Potawatomi last year, and we both ran into issues, and we both ended up DNFing at different times. But what? Yeah, the year before we ran the 50 out there, and we're like, all right, let's up this goal a little bit for the following year,
Sure. So. What I guess let's go for the down first, and we'll go up. So, what happened at Potawatomi last year to you and your buddy that didn't get you across the finish line?
You know, definitely for me, it was something happened with me in that 40 mile-ish arena. I should say it started before that. Once I got to about 26, 27 miles, I felt like this weird um this weird sensation, like I had a wood chip in my shoe, and which didn't surprise me based on the trail, right? And it was one of those things. It was on the side of my ankle, on the inside part of my ankle. I'm like, oh, no big deal, I'll just wait till a good stopping point and I'll take it out. Well, it was still kind of, it was kind of annoying me. And I got to the point where I finally stopped to take it. I did a sweep in my sock with my finger, and I'm like, oh, there's no wood chip there. That's weird. But I kind of did it again. And
Fun.
um, yeah. And then when I finally stopped and I took off my shoe, I had this big blister on the inside of my ankle, which I never had before. I never had a blister there. And I'm like, where the heck did this come from? And why here out of all places? I mean, I've had blisters other places and they're usually on my toes, but not there. And it all started from there, and it kind of went downhill. I had shoes at the next drop location, and actually, no, not at the next drop. They're about 8 miles away, which doesn't sound like that far, but when you need to change your shoe to take pressure off a point, it's a distance.
I mean,
So
anybody who's dealt with chafing for more than like 2 miles should understand that like 8 miles, it exponentially gets worse every mile. Absolutely, dude.
yeah,
I feel you. Yeah.
it adds up.
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely.
So by the time I finally got to my shoes to change them, I was kind of wrecked, and I started hiking more as well. But I really got myself into a bad spot because I started hiking and my quads just like blew up. I mean, they literally, they felt like a bunch of mad teenagers just hammered on both of my quads, and they were swollen and they hurt to the touch. And I'm like, what in the heck? I mean, what is going on? I mean, I did a lot of elevation stuff. A big elevation challenge in December of last year, put on by our local ultra group, which was a super fun challenge. And I did a lot of elevation. I'm like, why is this happening? What is going on? So anywho, yeah, I came walking into an aid station, well, hobbling into an aid station with two branches as my trekking poles,
Oh,
and
dude.
no headlamp. It was after dark, no headlamp, and here I am, coming over this hill, just a wreck.
Oh man.
So yeah, it's a horrible feeling.
Yeah, dude, that is a rough day. I've had that sensation in my quads before, and it's not a fun time. So I can see how that would lead to pulling out. Probably the smart choice there. So if we're looking at this most recent one that you finished, what is that, a week ago? The world's very strange. How was that? How was Mines of Spain?
That race was completely incredible. And this was the second time I signed up for the 100-miler there. I did last year, and I had to drop back to the 100K. And I didn't even know if I'm going to be able to do the 100K because I overtrained. I injured my knee during the summer, and it just was kind of a wreck there for a while. And so yeah, I really wanted Mines of Spain to be my first 100, and it was. So everything worked out right. But what an absolutely incredible race! The community there was just, we're all rooting each other on, and I can't say enough good things about that group. They're really awesome.
That's awesome, dude. That's really cool. I mean, I can
Sorry to
tell
get
like
choked up on that one, but man.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's kind of what this sport's about, right? Like the support that you're there. And I mean, I read your like post race recap, and the fact that you and a bunch of other people like basically dragged each other through the darkness and like made it made it happen is huge, man. So like let's
All right.
dive into that a little bit. If you're looking at Mines of Spain, it's a 5 loops around a 20-mile loop, right? Like that's kind of our setup.
Yep.
Yeah. So for one question I'd have that I think some people would be curious about if they're looking at a race like this is that loop course. Do you find that like helpful or harmful? Because for me, I'd almost worried that like I get bored, but I think for other people, like they'd find that really supportive when they're like in the later
Yep.
dredges of it to know where they are. So how did that feel for you?
Um, it's kind of mixed because Potawatomi was a 10-mile loop. And a 10-mile loop, gives you 10 chances to DNF.
Sure,
It
that's a
goes
way to do
wrong.
that. Yeah,
Let's
I
just
like
face
that.
it's easy. It's an easy out, you know? With a 20-mile loop, it's not as easy. And for me, mentally, it was all about the loops. It wasn't about the miles, it was about the loops. Let's just get through the loop, right? And it was not the time necessarily per mile, but it was the time on the loop. And that's kind of where my mindset was. And I had a couple buddies that kind of helped me get that mindset when we would do preview runs there and training runs at the mines. Let's do it in 5 hours or what have you. What is the goal? So that's really where my mind was. It wasn't up till the last 10 miles when we were doing the countdown, um,
Good.
that really came into play. And of course my watch died on that, so I had to lean on my running buddy for that. But
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. Well, good. I'm glad that's helpful. And I remember you saying that, and I gave that advice to somebody who's running a Loop K50 course tomorrow. And it's like, just focus on the loop, dude. Like, this is the one. Like, this is the loop you're in, and finish the loop, and then keep going. Right. So yeah,
totally that was really, then I wasn't looking at my watch all the time and what have you. And I didn't need to be looking at my watch anyway. I already took a couple falls. I didn't need to take another one and injure myself in the last 20 miles.
yeah, dude, I feel that. So if we're talking struggles here, what I mean, obviously it's running 100 miles. There's going to be problems. What did you find like difficult, or what did you learn from this first one that you'd pass on to the next one?
From this first one, um, two things. I guess one, I had planned to have 2 headlamps with me at all times and backup batteries. And for whatever, I was in a hurry, and for the third loop, it was going to be getting dark. And I did not grab my second headlamp like a dummy. I just didn't. I grabbed my one that my kids got me for Christmas the year prior. I'm like, oh, this is a good one. It's got the LED on top, what have you. But I didn't think about it being a USB charge. And though I had, 3, battery packs in both my drop bags, that doesn't help you when you're out on the course, right? Even though I had those, they didn't help me. And my freaking light went dead. Like, oh gosh, we were only probably 2-3 miles in, but there, when you're 2 or 3 miles in on a elevation course like this, there's this goat trail that you got to go up the side of the hill. I mean,
Yeah.
and you get to the top, and I'm messing with it again, and it would turn on and then it would just turn off again, within minutes. So we were pretty deep in, and my buddy Dan, I'm like, is it on? And he's like, yeah, no, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? And this dude, freaking, he's running the 100K, so it's 3 loops. And, he's got goals. He's got time goals. And he's like, come on, man. He's like, we'll get this done. I'll get you through. And I'm like, I got one at the aid station, but it was the last aid station too. So he's like, oh, we only got to get through like 10 miles. He's like, we'll get you there. And I'm like, all right, dude. I'm like, let's go. And I mean, what
That's
a
huge.
that is huge. If I would have had to go back at that point, it would have cost me a good hour, if not more. I don't know that I could have completed it within the 33-hour, time limit that the group had on. So
I mean, 5 miles on a course like that is like an eternity. So yeah, man.
and it was, and that's where I took my second digger. We were going down kind of a rocky hill, and I lost it and took a nice shoulder/elbow dive into the into the brush on the side, and it was all good. But at the same time, I felt bad for slowing him down. I'm like, oh man, and then we get into one of the aid stations, the one just before where I had my headlamp, and there was a guy that noticed me working there, and he's like, dude, do you need a headlamp? I got one in my truck. And I'm like, man, if I could borrow it, I will most certainly take you up on that offer. So
That's awesome,
that helped a lot.
That's really cool. I mean, I feel like that's what we're all here for. I did the same thing for somebody, actually, probably around the same time that guy was giving you one. I was giving someone a headlamp because his went dead while I was volunteering. And you gotta help each other out, man. It's one of those things.
Yeah, that's awesome. I couldn't thank that guy and Dan enough for getting to that point.
Yeah, dude. So that's good. I'm glad, like, that's such a big thing for, the community of the sport and why it's such a welcoming place. So if that was your first big one. What else did you learn from your first 100?
I'm a guy, I get in my head, and probably my mental strength is one of the biggest things that can hold me back. And I think I can start spiraling. And I know that. And I know that happened at Pot and at Potawatomi. And honestly, it could have made my physical, areas of hurt even worse.
Oh, for sure.
So I would say, for that night portion, if you can find somebody to partner up with to get through the night, that is huge. If you don't have a pacer, there's other people out on that course looking for that as well. And really this group that was out there, we're just talking about pacers, and this was at, I think it was loop 3. We were talking about pacers, me and a couple other people within our group as we're just running. And I'm like, I didn't really think about a pacer and how valuable they would be and how much I would probably need one until it was too late. It was probably 3 or 4 weeks before the race. And I think you and I had a conversation about that too. And
a little bit, yeah.
I don't know. They're so incredibly valuable. And both of them are like, oh, you can jump in with us. My pacer's coming the next loop. And, I'm like, really? I'm like, that is so awesome. Here I got 2 people that are like, hey, just come on in, take along with us. And it was after that conversation that I had a headlamp issue. And they were like a half an hour, 40 minutes in front of us, which trying to catch up with them was pretty tough at that point. Then I ran into another friend, a group of 3 of us were running, and ran into a friend, Eileen, and she's like, Scott, I know you don't have a pacer. What do you think about like partnering up for the night? And I'm like, yes. I'm like, absolutely. And she's like, all right. And what I didn't know is Eileen she had the sleepies pretty bad. And
for sure.
So she was, at one point she said she was laying on one of the park benches just taking a quick snooze. And but yeah, we didn't know. I don't think we knew I didn't know how bad I was going to need her support for the next 2 loops.
Sure.
But we both made it. We both came in. We both finished. And it was freaking awesome. It's the longest I ran with anybody in a race. I mean, we probably ran about 50 miles together, because it was at about mile 50 that we ran into each other. And then we finished out that loop, and then we did 2 more and came in at the finish line together. And it was just so cool.
That's
you know,
awesome,
I was
man.
on loop 4, I was still feeling good. So, I was still pulling along. We both ran into gut issues, which was absolutely horrible. I mean, I'm like popping probiotics out on the course every few hours, and I'm like, why do they have to put these porta potties so close to the aid stations? It's just, I'm like, nobody needs to hear this.
Oh man.
Yeah, and it's not all pretty. I mean, there is a point I needed to change my shorts, and I'm just like humiliated, and just talk about being uncomfortable and getting to that point. You know what? That's the raw part of doing some of this hard shit that we do. And
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I mean, you came through a lot of hard shit to get even to this race. Like, I'm not going to dive too deep unless you want to, like, share what you want, but I do want to show that, like, quite literally nothing can go to plan for like 3 fucking months and you can still hit your goals.
Right.
So like in your prep for this, you definitely hit some roadblocks, and you still got there, man. And like, do you think some of that was part of the carryover to your struggles on the course?
Yeah. So I'll lay it out there. I mean, all this shit's real, right? It's so I ended up getting Lyme disease. Actually not too long after we started training for this race.
And it was like a month.
Like, yeah, shit. And I didn't know what the hell. And this wasn't one of those things where, like, oh, you've seen ticks, you see the bullseye, It wasn't like that. There was at one point early on, which I remembered later, that I had 3 like black dots on the inside of my big toe, which is really hard to see. You got to kind of, if you're sitting Indian style, you got to kind of twist your toe to see the underside of your toe. But I'm not one that runs around outside without shoes and socks on. I just don't do that, And I do check my legs, and I check my arms, and whatever for ticks. And my wife's a nurse, and I have my wife look at it, and I'm like, hey, check this out. And she's like, they just look like little blood blisters. She's like, you'll be fine. So I passed it off.
For sure.
Well, I don't even know how much time, if it was 2-3 weeks later, all of a sudden I thought I didn't know if I had the flu, if I had COVID, or what the hell I had. It was horrible. I was, a fever in bed, COVID test was negative, flu test was negative. I'm like, just to be quite honest, it happened. The worst part was over a weekend, and I went into urgent care. They gave me some antibacterial medication, didn't really know what it was. And I had an appointment with my doctor on Monday, and my whole goal was to stay out of the hospital, stay out of the emergency room. That was my only goal, just because it's damn expensive to do that.
Yeah, dude.
And so anyway, I finally get to the point where I got to my doctor, and she looked at my foot, because while I was sick in bed, my big toe and my 2 toes next to them swelled up. And I didn't know why. I'm like, what is going on? What's with my toes? They're like blowing up. And the funny part about it is, the weekend before that, I did a race. I did like a 9-hour endurance run. So I'm like, did I kick something? What happened? And actually, before that race, I did kick my kid's gaming chair really, really bad, and thought I broke my toe, but I didn't. It's just one of those things, though, that I'm like, I don't understand why this is happening. I get there. The doctor looks at it, and she's like, I don't know. And during our conversation, I told her what I did. And at the very end, I'm like, maybe we're doing blood tests and what have you. And I'm like, maybe we should throw on there Lyme's just to make sure. I'm like, I don't remember seeing any ticks, et cetera, et cetera. Well, fast forward, it came back positive. And I distinctly remember waiting for the test to come back. And I was doing a run, I think a short one that was on my training schedule. And I remember in my notes putting on there that my left knee felt like it was low on fluid.
Mm.
And I'm like, what the hell? I've never had this before. And then I had all these aches and pains that I'd never had, like,
Yep.
My thumb that I injured in high school and all this stuff that I just didn't understand where this was coming from. So now it all made sense. But that journey was a hell of a journey, because not only did I get that blood test done, and I had said to the person that called me back and told me that I was positive, I'm like, well, I can still, train, right? I can do low heart rate runs. I know I'm going on this medication for 11 days and what have you. And she's like, well, yeah, if you've been doing that, I would think so, So I'm like, okay, let's roll with it. And then my swelling went down in my toes, but it never totally went away. So when I called him back after 11 days, I'm like, all right, I'm on my last day of medication. My swelling's still there in my toes. The redness is still there slightly. What are we going to do? Another 11 days on this medication, or what's the next steps? I don't know. And so they put me back on the medication for 11 days. And I'm like, okay, I just want to make sure, like, I've been doing low heart rate runs, can I kick up the intensity now? And the doctor got wind of this and just like totally like busted my bubble on this one. He's like, no, absolutely not. We just did labs again, and no intense activity whatsoever. I don't even want you speed walking. I don't want you going out for, and I'm like, what? I'm like, are you? And I remember calling back in because I was just so dumbfounded by this phone call. I called back in the next day and I'm like, can you help me understand, like, why? What is going on? Like, and they're like, you know what? They're and the nurse, and she is so awesome. She happens to be somebody that I know, and she knows some of the shit that I do. And I said to her, I'm like, can you help me? Like, I can watch my heart rate. I can do low heart rate activity. And she's like, no, she's like, the labs came back and there's signs of tissue damage, organ tissue damage. So she's like, we don't know what it is, if it's the heart, if it's the liver, if it's the kidneys. So that's why they're sending you to a cardiologist, and you need to get cleared by the cardiologist before you can do any intense activity. And then I said, well, you know what I do for a living. Should I be working? I'm pushing and pulling around 80-pound carts every day, some intensity to that. She's like, that's a great question. And that came back as of, no, I shouldn't. So yeah, I had 3 visits to a cardiologist, all kinds of, tests there, and everything was clear. So I was finally able to get back to training. But what I didn't know is that antibiotic that I was on for 22 days kills the good bacteria in your gut. It's an antibacterial, as well as the bad bacteria. And I don't know what it was, like 3 weeks after that, I was dealing with just horrible diarrhea. And it wouldn't go away. And long story short, I mean, I did 2 races with it, and each race I did, 2 races with that. And each one I did, it was worse.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember the first race, it was ended up being a loop type race too. And every couple loops I'd have to hit the bathroom, and I'm like, God, this sucks. And I'm like, nothing's helping, anti-diarrheal. And then the second race I did, which was SCOCO, I had to hit that bathroom every single loop. It was not pretty. So guess what? It was C. diff, which basically is a gut bacteria that that's not pretty. And the medication that they give you on top of that is like awful.
Yeah, it sucks, dude. It sucks a lot. I'm just over here like muted, kind of laughing because there's nothing else to do. Like you and I met in June, dude. So it's not like all this was over the course of a year. It was like 3 months that you just got shit handed to you. And you, to your credit, and this is kind of why I wanted to dive into this a little bit. And like, thank you for sharing all that, because I know, like, you know, not everybody wants to put their medical history out there, but it's like all that can happen. And you took it in stride as much as you can. Like you tell me you can't do cardiology, so we worked on walks and maybe a little bit of band training here. You couldn't run, so we did strength training as much as we could to like keep your quads working. We made adjustments, and this is like why doing this shit is so hard sometimes, because life is not cooperative, and you took as much of it as you could and handled it, and you still got across this 100-miler finish line after 3 months of I could, dude, very honestly, I couldn't have written it worse. Like, this is like a fucking novel. So yeah, dude, credit to you, and thank you for sharing all of that. But it was a nutty 3 months.
Oh my God. And if anybody out there listening to this has Lyme's, right, and they're put on medication for Lyme's, please talk to your doctor about a probiotic. Get on something, because my wife, being a nurse, and she's like, after it came back positive for C. diff, she's like, oh, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm like, why didn't somebody say something a while ago, you know?
Yeah, like, I didn't know the meds that you're on, or I thought of it too, but it's one of those, like, I will say, if you're on a hefty antibiotic like that, a good probiotic, and not like, I'm sure Activia yogurt's fine, but we're talking like seed or VLC number 3 or something that will actually like help reseed your gut. They've shown that after about 3 months, your body will kind of level it out anyway. But like, if you want to expedite the process, like, let's get a good probiotic in, it can help you out a lot.
And so the Thursday, that race, the Mines of Spain was on Friday. On Thursday morning, I woke up and I had the same symptoms. There was one particular thing that I had with C. diff that I never had before, and it was back. And that's why I had my baggie of probiotics out on the course with me.
Yeah,
and I'm like, oh my God, and just trying to stay hydrated as much as possible. I'm like, you know what? We've come too far. I've trained too hard to just throw in this stall. It's not happening. It's not happening like that.
You did great, man. And there you are in your sweatshirt with your belt buckle somewhere in your house. And congrats, dude. Yes. So I know we're like wrapping up a little bit on time. You have family coming into town. I wanted to ask, like, have you had a coach before?
No, I've not.
Cool. Awesome. Well, you were easy to coach. I honestly am kind of surprised by that. So great. How was it?
It was awesome. It really was, because the areas I really needed help with was, you know, when you're doing this crazy hard shit, you just don't know how much you need to do in training without overdoing it and hurting yourself.
Yeah, dude.
I felt like the whole time I needed to push my limits, but sometimes I just don't stop when I should. So it was awesome having somebody there to help guide me through this without hurting myself, and getting my nutrition and my hydration to where it needed to be. So yeah, it was, I would highly recommend it.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, and this isn't necessarily a sales pitch for me. It's like, I think people should, you know, have a coach once or twice, kind of see where you are, see what you might get a little better at. But thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
And I mean, it's no joke. I mean, you people out there, I'm sure, are struggling with, like, you know, how much do I need to do? And there's training plans online. Sure, there's training plans online, but everybody's different, and everybody does some different stuff. So, you know, and everybody has curveballs of some sort.
Yeah, dude. Whether it be one of the most ridiculous 3 months I've had, or everybody listening to this probably knows I basically tore my MCL a few weeks, months at this point ago. Like, you're probably going to get a curveball in your training. So that's kind of why it's helpful. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And moving into future, I know you're going to do a little bit of strength training, and I'm going to write that program later for you today. But as far as like what's next on the racing front?
Well, as of 7:22 this morning, my buddy Dave and I decided that we are doing pot. Well, he already committed to it, but I committed to doing the pot 100 come April. So that is what's up next. I said to him, I'm like, hey, what do you think about partnering up through the night? And he's like, absolutely. And so he didn't say absolutely, but he said, yeah, I think that's a great idea. He's like, the last one, his first 100, he did at Hennepin, which was so awesome. That was the beginning of October. And
was he the one you paced?
No.
Okay.
Which reminds me though that if anybody has the opportunity to pace somebody before they do their first 100, you can literally see what somebody goes through, the good, the bad, the ugly, all that shit between miles 20 and 100. Do it. It's worth every minute of it. I mean, volunteering at aid stations and crewing is awesome too. Don't get me wrong. But if you're out with somebody for 20 miles side by side and you're seeing all the shit that's coming their way and they're doing, yeah,
dude,
it's good stuff. So anyway.
Yeah. With your shortened scale, I'm actually really happy with how that turned out. You ran your 50K and then immediately went into pacing somebody over, the end stages of 100. So we got this like weird little impromptu training camp that I usually would not recommend timing wise, but again, you gotta roll with what you have. And yeah, sometimes I think pacing, definitely crew somebody before you do some crazy stuff like this. And if you have the opportunity to pace and it would be a good fit, great choice. Absolutely.
And Cadence was a guy that I was out there pacing. He was absolutely just phenomenal. And he crushed his race. I mean, his first 100 under sub 24. I mean, I was worried I wasn't going to be able to keep up with him after doing a 50K that morning. So
that's huge, dude. That's awesome. Good for him. That's really cool.
So
cool. Yeah. Well, you're running pot 100 in April. Great. I'm stoked to see how that goes.
And we pretty much our core group that did Mines of Spain that we all kind of trained together. There's about 10 of us that I think, based on our group chat, are pretty much committed because of the experience to doing it next year. So if anybody listening is looking for just an amazing 100-mile or 100K race, Mines of Spain, I mean, one of the best race directors around, Josh and Michelle, I cannot say enough. They're like, they're just awesome. And the volunteers out there, and just a family atmosphere. You can't beat it. And it's a tough course. If you want a challenge, that's a tough course.
Yeah, dude, it looks rough. And I don't think it's, I think the stats on paper don't give it nearly enough credit, if I'm going to be really honest. Like, you hear people talk about it, it sounds hard. And like, if you look at the finishing times, 5 people finished under 24? Like, it looks fucked, for being really honest. Like, it looks hard. So awesome, dude.
Yeah, it is. And the DNF rate, I mean, just looking back over the years, it's like, I don't know, this is my first one, right? But it's like 60, the finish rate is like 60 to 70%.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that falls in line average with other races or where that falls, but that's just,
I think it's a little, like, the finish rate's a little low, the DNF rate's a little higher from what I can put together. It kind of depends, but yeah, dude, it looks tough. It's a tough race.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, but the verts and the different climbs, and oh my God, some of the stairs. Whew.
You sold it so hard. Now you're just like, nah, don't do this one. Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming on here, Scott. Anything else you want to tell anybody before we head out?
No, I don't think so. Just enjoy the journey. It's fun. And, I tried to take that leap from going from a 50 miler to a 100 miler. And, if you're thinking about doing that, a lot of people can certainly do that. I, for one, I needed to do that 100K first. and really, take the gradual steps instead of trying to jump into something high. So.
I think that's wise, man. And I do feel like there's a big gap between the 50 and 100 miler. I don't know if it's the night or what, but like it's a very large step.
Yep. It's definitely a difference there.
Yeah. I'd feel stupid because it's like twice the mileage, but there's something more than just twice the mileage. It's a lot. Well, thanks, man.
Doable. So,
yeah. Oh yeah, you got it. Well, thanks, dude. Appreciate it. I'm going to click close. Hold on 1 sec. Thank you, anybody who listened to this, and we'll be back soon with more. Thank you for listening to the show. To be clear, I'm not a doctor nor a registered dietitian, and nothing you heard was medical advice. You should always speak with a qualified medical professional before making any changes to your training regimen. If you enjoy the podcast or found it useful, please take a couple seconds to give it a rating or share it with a friend. Every little bit helps. And if you want more of this information, please head to the Trail and Ultra Running Nutrition group on Facebook. You'll be in good company with other like-minded people who like to do hard stuff outside.